All right, and just to follow up on some of the things discussed yesterday, we've been putting up in the Facebook group some readings about feminism and theology. For those of you who don't know, there's a wonderful website. I posted something from the website called Jewish Women's Archives, JWA something or another, which has a lot of resources about feminism and Judaism. And it also has both historical and interviews, but it also has some articles. And that's where I found the article about Judith Plaskow. If you're not going to read her whole book, that one article is just a nice little taste. Not everybody likes to read a whole book. That's okay. And as anybody knows who's in the academy, that these ideas are constant flowing, and there's nothing considered static, even feminism. And I'd have to say, when it comes to feminism and biblical studies, some of the most interesting stuff is coming out of African-American feminist theologians. And that's a whole universe. I once gave a sermon on Rosh Hashanah, actually, about African-American theologians' take on the whole Hagar story, for instance. You might remember that, or you might not. I don't, it's okay with me if you don't remember any of my sermons, but I did, because in the world of what's called womanist theology, really African-Americans are leading the way. And there's a lot of some really wonderful, wonderful, wonderful work happening. And I would say there, and it's more complicated. So I should say Judith Plaskow's book laid a framework and put things down on paper that had just not, had been in many different places and disparate as things, like we've discussed in the Psalms class. How do you distribute new ideas? And in the 1800s, the explosion of newspapers and magazines made it possible for ideas to more quickly get into the bloodstream than publishing a book. It takes a long time to write a book. It takes a long time to get a book published. And by the time the book published, there are new ideas out there, especially in the 1800s. It's even true today, right, that books can be a slow process. And now that we have Twitter and Facebook and blogs and podcasts, ideas are moving at a very rapid rate. It's very hard for us as modern people to appreciate that kind of infusion of ideas into the intellectual and spiritual bloodstream. Took a long time, up until the 20th century. It just didn't happen fast. And sometimes it would take generations for some new ideas to integrate. Now that's not true. Anyway, in feminism, there's a lot happening. And now really there's a whole world now of, coming from the trans and non-binary and queer world, that is quite exciting. And we're in the midst of it. We're in the midst of it. So there's, and as Judy said, in the Kohenet world and in the whole universe, that emerged really from a certain stream. And it's happening everywhere in different kinds of ways. I'll just repeat that just because, and I've tried to reach her. I've tracked down an email, but have not been successful in reaching her to come to the class. When an Orthodox Jewish, modern Orthodox person uses he, and I appreciate the critique of that, given that why is he the normative gender use in Hebrew or in English? I really don't think she's thinking about he in the way that is a huge obstacle for us. That doesn't mean, I'll repeat, it isn't an obstacle for us or for some of us, but don't assume when you read somebody that it's functioning the same way for them as it is for you. And that's true in going to the ancient Psalms, right? What are obstacles for us in reading how they were written 2,500 years ago doesn't mean that they were the same obstacle for them in getting to what the deepest truth is in these Psalms. So it's a little bit of a complicated concept to hold at the same time as trying to do what I keep saying. What is our personal relationship with this Psalm? How do we personally get something to it? And the spiritual challenge is that no matter what obstacles exist, how will you climb over or around or dig under the obstacle to get to spiritual meaning for yourself? What I don't accept is saying, this means nothing to me, I'm walking away. It might mean that in a given minute, but come back, come back, come back. What might be an obstacle to you as a 20-year-old who has certain perspectives on life, it's going to look really different when you're 50 or 60 or 70 or 80. And coming back and developing this relationship, even if it's a relationship where you say, I disagree, I hate you, to the psalm, not to you. Coming back and engagement will keep, I promise you, if you stay engaged with the psalms, even if you stay in a place of anger, it will result in a deepening relationship. Not unlike long-term relationships in general, like with our families of origin or with our partners or with the friends in our lives. We go through different phases. And if we remain in relationship, those different phases will add texture ultimately. It doesn't mean we won't be wounded by it, but there will be something deeper because we've been able to move through places of strong emotion. Okay, with that, let's look at Fisher, Psalm 20. And I know all of you have studied it to some degree, so let's, do I have the right glasses? Yeah. And I urge you in your own lives, when you come across a psalm, sit down with it and say, if I were to say this psalm out loud in my own words to make it meaningful, what words would I use? So let's just look at Fisher. I'm going to have the Hebrew over here. Again, I so prefer when we have a volume that has the Hebrew and whatever the English is next to it, but you can start to see how difficult that is and how few people do it. Although, remember what I showed you that Bernstein does, which is an interesting solution, is that she puts in the back of her book the original Hebrew, which is, so we've seen all the different solutions to this. Levy has it on the same page. Fisher, Mitchell, some of the others don't have it at all. And Alter doesn't have it at all. And it's all a matter of how to format the book so it isn't massive. But what we have with Bernstein again is that she's done this exercise with 150 Psalms, but tried to keep the book from being massive. So all the Hebrew is in the back in small letters, so you can go back to it. And Fisher chooses selectively the Psalms and then doesn't have the Hebrew there. So we see all different ways that authors come to this. All right, so I'm going to read us through one reading and then I'll open it up. And I know some of you have had a lot of engagement with this psalm. So if we go back to the original, first of all, we see that Fisher, like Bernstein, like Mitchell, leave off the superscription, the Lamanatseach Mizmor LeDavid. Not of interest to Fisher. Fisher doesn't number the verses. He doesn't stay necessarily close to the architecture or the format of the original psalm. But look what Fisher does in small caps, right? Is that right, Harold? Small caps?
Initial cap, small, yes, initial cap, small caps.
Initial cap, small caps. So look at what he does with the formatting. Now he's referring here, so the first verse in the Hebrew was Yancha Yud-Hei Vav-Hei B'Yom Sarah. Yancha, answer Yud-Hei Vav-Hei in the day of trouble. So, but what does Fisher do? He reverses it, which I love actually, which is, he says, in trouble, in this small caps, which is neon, right? This is his way of creating an emphasis in the very letters of the psalm. In trouble, he's crying out, answer us. Let your unsayableness, and somebody pointed out yesterday, this psalm has a lot of words about ask, accept, say, answer, lots of relational words of language. Let your unsayableness, and this goes back to the that Yud-Hei Vav-Hei, unsayableness, trying to get us to a sense of whatever this power in the universe is, it's unsayable. We can't, getting back to our discussion yesterday, how do we talk about these enormous issues of infinity? The word itself, infinity, how many times do you actually think, what does infinity really mean? It's impossible to absorb that. Your muscles in your mind to really think about infinity, not just the word infinity, But can you really concept in your mind infinity? It's very hard. I've tried. I've actually done meditations on this. It's really, really hard to do. If you're an astronomer, you've spent a lot of time with concepts of infinity, and your muscles, your mind, your mental muscles, if you're maybe also a mathematician. So this is a theologian's question, unsayableness. Jacob's mystery. What is Jacob's mystery? And several of you brought this issue up. And an excellent question. Why does the psalmist talk about the name of Jacob? So it's not only Elohei Yaakov in the original Hebrew, not only the God of Jacob in the original Hebrew, it says Shem, the name of the of Elohei Yaakov. Wow, what does that mean? May the name, if you go back to the original, may the name, and that really brings into our consciousness that Jacob's name changes. For me, this is what brings up. Jacob is the one who wrestles through the night, and his name changes from Jacob to Yisrael, to Israel. Let me just finish this stanza, and then I'll open it up for some comments, and we'll do it stanza by stanza. But why? And this is, we've seen each of our authors struggle with this question of why we use the word Jacob, where the word Jacob is. And you'll notice Bernstein just drops Jacob, doesn't use the reference to Jacob. That's not meaningful to her. She just leaves it. And I forgot my altar. I just want to see how altar does it. Mitchell doesn't do this psalm. So I wanted to show you. So altar, may the name of Jacob's God make you safe. Protect us, going back, sending us help, support. So look at that. Answer us, protect us, send us help, support. So there's the problem is the first verse. And this is so much like that Annie Lamont, when we talked about help. This is a very powerful, and that's why this psalm is used a lot for moments of fear, where there's a time of needing protection. But let's stop now for a couple of hands, and then just to the two hands that are up now, and then we'll continue.
Okay, Lori Spear and then Judy.
When Jacob wrestled, didn't he at the end ask, "What's your name?"
Yes, excellent. Very good point. And do you remember what the response is?
I can't tell you. No, the answer was, I can't tell you.
There's basically a resistance to offering it, but I'm going to read it to you directly. Judy, what's your question?
It was the same thing.
Yep. So let's look it up. This is a great reference. And if we were, we would do this just a second.
Is it the Asher Ayah?
No, not at that point.
No, he
No, that
just
comes
says,
later with
he asked
Moses.
the Ish, and the Ish sidesteps the question.
Exactly. Exactly. The Ish sidesteps the question.
And there, I looked and looked, I didn't find much in just common, when you Google it, to find discussions about that. It's all about the change of.
There are two things about Jacob that I just want to read to you here. So first of all, the one thing is that God says in the first time that he has the dream, which is a different time, but God says to Jacob, remember, I am with you. I will protect you wherever you go. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Jacob woke from his sleep and said, surely, this is the famous line, Yud-He Vav-He b'makom hazeh, God is in this place, v'anochi lo yadati, and I did not know. How awesome is this place? Okay, so that's the first time. So Jacob resumes his journey, and let me just get you the time of the, when Jacob is running afraid, which is the next parsha. And so Jacob was very afraid. Remember, he thinks his brother is about to kill him. So these are the two significant stories for this. So he spends the night, he stays alone. Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him, Ish, whatever Ish is. I don't think it's a man. I think it's an angel of some kind or God's presence. And when this creature saw that he had not prevailed against him, he wrenched Jacob's hip in its socket. So the socket of his hip was strained as he wrestled with him. Then he said, "Let me go, for the dawn is breaking." So Jacob says to this creature, this angel, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." Said the creature, "What is your name?" He replied, "Jacob." The creature, the angel, the messenger from God said, "Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven, you have struggled with beings divine and human, and you have prevailed." Then Jacob asked, "Tell me your name." But the angel said, "You must not ask my name." And he left. So those are the two stories that I think this both in the toward the end of Genesis, that this is referring to the mystery first of that story of the dream with the ladder, and then the second with this angel. Did Cantor Nemi have his hand up, or is...
Yes, Cantor Nemi had, and then Laurie
Okay.
Spear, and then Jeremy Lawrence.
Oh, I was just, I'm always biblical namesake and all that, always been fascinated by the figure.
Of course, you're a Jacob.
And contending with and not being particularly happy with my biblical namesake on most occasions. But there's a beautiful midrash about the Ish, who the Ish may have been. There's some who suggested it may have been some kind of angelic representation of Esau or something like that. But my favorite by far is one that connects the idea that Jacob is a figure who's always running from his problems. He runs from Esau, he runs from Laban, he runs from Shechem. But the one time where he's not able to run and is stopped by the river and by this Ish and has to wrestle, the midrash that I found, I can't remember the source. I think it was some Hasidic teacher who suggested the Ish was himself. That for the first time he had to actually face himself, his own faults, his own problems, his own running, and he could go no further until.
Beautiful. Somebody, I just looked, somebody said that doesn't Fisher begin every psalm with caps? No, he doesn't. He does sometimes, but not every time.
And Lisa Brown says, is this verse why we refer to God as Hamakom?
Good question. I don't know. I don't know.
Okay. Jeremy Lawrence had his hand up.
I asked, I think my group, or I don't know who I asked. Does any other contemporary human ever called Jacob Israel? And does he ever correct anybody when they call him Jacob? Does he say, no, my name is Israel?
Interesting. I'd have to, I don't know. Wouldn't be difficult to do. There are only a few chapters after this, a bunch of chapters, but we'd have to read through. That's a good question.
I mean, it just seems to me that what an important moment to be given a new name and to be given the name Israel and be told that this is your heritage.
Yep.
And he just lives out the rest of his life.
A lot is written about the fact that Jews become known as Bnei Yisrael, not Bnei Avraham, not Bnei Yitzchak, not children of Abraham, not children of Isaac, but children of Israel, the second name, the name of those who have struggled to achieve the name. So it's very interesting, but I don't know. I'd have to read through to be sure, and I've never done that.
I'm also looking for the passage with the angel, and I found in Genesis 35:9, God appeared again to Jacob on his arrival. This is not the angel. God appeared again to Jacob on his arrival from Padan Aram, and he blessed him. God said to him, "You whose name is Jacob, you shall be called Jacob no more, but Israel shall be your name." Thus he named him Israel. I don't know where that falls. Is that after the wrestling match? So that God now names him Israel in addition to the angel, or it's before?
What I'd have to look that up. You know what, I want to just move on a little bit because I want to make sure we
All
cover
right,
the rest of
forget
the
it.
Psalm. But these are all fantastic questions and exactly the right way to study this. And Jeremy, if you would take that on to really do a little bit more study about that and then report to us next week, I'd love that.
I think
I'll,
Alicia Fowler had some
Okay.
comments on that
All right,
too.
Alicia?
They might want, no, that they might want to talk to one another, or Alicia
Okay,
said that, Alicia, why don't you unmute yourself and tell us what you just wrote?
We can also do it later. It was the same concept. I don't think anybody refers to Jacob directly as Israel, like as a character to character speech. And he's referred to as Israel a couple of times by the narrator. So Israel and his son went so-and-so. And I think, Jeremy, the answer to your question is yes, that God renaming Israel happens, or Jacob happens after the
after.
fantastic.
Thank you, Alicia.
And by the way, if you remember the lines from Matovu, right? Matovu ohalecha Yaakov,
Right.
Mishkanotecha Yisrael. So it starts, that verse of the Psalm has both in it, where there's transition from Yaakov to Yisrael, to Israel.
And Darina had actually pointed that out also in the chat.
Oh, okay.
Ben Shafran.
On a different note, I'm struck by the change that Fisher has from the original, which is a psalm of consolation. God will grant you, will make you feel good. And Fisher makes it more of I can't think of the word, more of a plea to God.
Yep. Good point. Exactly. This is really turning, and Fisher is doing exactly what I'm encouraging everybody, how to make this meaningful to you. So for Fisher, he's turning this into a personal prayer, right? A personal plea. Protect us, answer us, send us help, support. You know, that's a very much, I agree completely. By the way, this issue of changing names becomes a very prominent feature of Jewish life to this day. In the Orthodox world, if things are going badly, people will change their name or add a name to their middle name. And I've been present for several of these name change. They do it at the Torah service, and somebody will say, my name is now so-and-so, and add the word Chaim, which means life, if there's, or often it's adding the word life to their name in order to ask for help from God or protection from in being sick. So that the whole thing of changing names in Jewish practice continues to this day. Okay, let's okay. Is there something urgent, or can we move?
Well, let's ask Aura whether.
Okay, Aura.
This may be more rhetorical than anything else, but it struck me, you must not ask my name, what that might mean in the context of when this event took place or when this event was written about or whatever, and what does that mean? You know, whose name shouldn't we be asking about?
That is, studying those chapters of the Joseph narratives is really fun because of these kinds of questions, but we're going to have to leave it for now and just say there's mystery. I think for the simple answer to that is to say there's mystery about this relationship with the universe. And I think that that's what Fisher is bringing out in this stanza. But I did once teach this, it's called the Joseph narrative, the whole story from Joseph through the end of the book of Genesis, which is a great segment. And I also taught it because the Hebrew is really, really crispy, clear, and easy to teach biblical Hebrew. It's in all prose, all narrative, so there's none of the poetic difficulties. And it's really a great chunk to study because it brings out so many different issues, historical, theological, sociological, and it's just an amazing unit. And it's called the Joseph narratives, from the beginning of the book, the story of Joseph, all the way to the end. Okay, let's continue. Okay, except now this is going to what Ben is describing. This is really a personal offering. Fisher has shifted the orientation from, we saw in the English of may this happen, may that happen, but the imperfect of the Hebrew, to being a direct plea to God. That's how it's making it meaningful, or to the universe. I don't want to say God, a direct plea, right? Accept and remember our offerings, accept and honor our burnt sacrifice, grant what our hearts yearn for, fulfill our resolve. So Ben's was very insightful in seeing the shift, which is totally, as I keep saying, legitimate. So to say, we rejoice in your meeting us. Now we go out to meet you with your nameless name scrawled on our banners. Remember what they're referring to, what Fisher is referring to here is that how Levy had described that line with the quotations. Again, we have this unsayable, nameless, the mystery of the universe, the sense there's mystery in our universe. Fulfill our petitions. There's no sense here that there's kind of a traditional, and honestly, I don't even believe in the traditional, but really trying to open us up to whom do we pray? What part of the universe do we seek strength from? Now here, for Fisher, this is the first time we have the pronoun I, right? I now know that the dedicated ones will feel your saving grace, that you will answer them from the heavens, will lift up your right arm. Sorry, Shep, and sorry all the lefties in the crowd. Fisher is maintaining the dominance of what right means here. We have all seen that that's troublesome as a privilege, but the biblical orientation is very much that way. Some trust in chariots, some in horses. Again, Fisher goes back to, but we trust not in military solutions, not in political solutions, but we trust in your namelessness. So again, Fisher repeats this sense of unsayableness, namelessness, mystery. It's not even clear. They, meaning going back to those who trust in the military, in the material, so to speak, they will lie prostrate, they will be fallen, but we will rise up standing erect. Oh, be our savingness. I think that's a neologism. I'm not sure that that actually is a word, but go ahead. He's writing poetry. So he's not covered. I like that he doesn't go right for the word salvation or redemption, because also obviously poets, he's using a word that to those of us who are native speakers will say, oh, that's a little strange, right? But that's his point. It brings our attention to it. Be our kingliness. So this is how Fisher is dealing with this idea of sovereignty, of kingdom, of kingliness, like the characteristic of in here, there's a feeling, I think, of sovereign, our dignity. Now, as we call out to your calling. Okay, so now let's take some more comments.
All right, I'm waiting for hands. Dean.
I wanted to be we trust your namelessness, and then when he refers to be our kingliness, our dignity, and be our savingness, it's this the unsayable, which is different than idols. I just think this is a beautiful interpretation of the psalm, because I think the Israelites in their descriptions of God really moved beyond idols, which were all over the place, in the Mesopotamia, and really moved to being able to embrace the universe and its unknowingness, and somehow bring that in personally. And I also think be our kingliness is the idea that we're going to elevate that above political strife.
Beautiful. I want to make a response. Monica points out that Fisher always does caps. Yes, but he doesn't always do the entire line. And he's in every time, if you look at where his small caps are, he's making a point. So sometimes it's the first word, sometimes it's the whole line, but he's usually making a point that he's like that when he does something in caps, he's making it a little bit of the headline of what he sees as a theme of the psalm. So thanks for that correction. But you'll see it's not always the entire line. Sometimes it's just one word of the line. Okay, but thank you for that correction. Absolutely correct.
Lori Spear,
In the third stanza, he starts with, "We rejoice in your meeting us, and we go out to meet you." And then the last line, if you can scroll down. "Now as we call out to your calling," that repeating that image
Yes.
twice of
Beautiful. I didn't know.
God and the person each coming towards each other.
Beautiful.
With
This
their
is
voices.
this is a very relational psalm, right? This is a psalm about relationship with whatever this universal power is, whether it's nature, whether it's a power in the universe. It's about relationship. I call out to you, you meet us, be with us. I want to be with you. Okay, thank you, Lori. I didn't notice the connection of the Fisher's two lines, but I see it now. Beautiful.
Linda Solomon, Linda. Let's go to Sherry or Simon.
I want to talk a little bit more about this idea of kingliness, because I think it just, it captures it just so beautifully. In a world where each tribal group, had its own king and in its own gods, kingliness says, I'm not just a king, I am the epitome of what it means to be a king. And this really helps me with the concept of melech. It's not being a king as an authority, but being, what is the quality of being a king that is overriding. And I think that's a much deeper understanding of that concept of melech than just king.
Well, I hope that now impacts like Friday night services and Kona services. That's a beautiful, and now it'll affect me too. And isn't it wonderful to see how different people are playing with these concepts, and sometimes their solutions help us navigate our own relationship to the words. Thank you, Simon. That helps me too. I like that a lot.
Ben Shafran.
I'm also going to talk about the last stanza. He seems to be internalizing the godly attributes as though they're all personal.
Yes.
That universal power is really within us.
Excellent, Ben. And this goes back to what I was discussing whenever, who can remember, this relationship to the immanent or the transcendent God, or both, right? So the sense of immanent in theology is the concept that there is a presence of the divine that's immanent, that's local, that's in all of us, that's accessible. And then there's the transcendent universal power, which is kind of above or has power beyond us. And at different times of our lives, we might be much more connected to an immanent sense of God's presence, whatever that word, I hate that word, but that immanent sense of divine power. And other times we might be down on our knees begging for some transcendent power in our lives. And both of those, and in general, although it's not, this is also a huge generalization, feminism, in the 70s, one of feminist theologians' reaction was to reject the transcendent sense of the power in the universe and say that was a very male dominance, all about ruler, and we will focus on the immanent presence of the power of the divine. And that became a tension. But I'll stop right there for now so others can speak.
Cantor Nemi says that this reminds him of a line from the Yehuda Halevi poem, "In the moment I reached out to you, I found you reaching in to me."
Beautiful.
Linda Solomon.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I didn't know what happened before. Anyway, there were two things that caught my eye. The first one is that the lines where he says, "They lie prostrate, fallen, but we rise up standing erect." I think that that's very powerful to me for some reason. I don't know why. It's just, contrasting the others with us, and It just speaks to me. And the other thing that really hit me, and I had my grandfather's name was Jacob. I never thought about the children of Israel being the children of Jacob slash Israel. I always thought of the children of Israel as being the children of the nation Israel. And, it just, they were always separated from me.
Uh-huh.
And now they're not.
Now they're not. Exactly. It's a fascinating, study of the biblical text and then theologically what it all means. So thank you.
Sarah Siegel?
When Dean was talking about how we, we don't have idols, I was thinking how sophisticated we are. And then I was thinking about this psalm and so much more of our language is really anthropomorphizing God or making it comfortable for us to be able to relate to God. We talked about this in the Chevruta the other day that, we're going to cook for you, with the sacrifice. I still think that as sophisticated as we were for dropping the idol concept, there's only so sophisticated we could be. We still have to relate to it somehow.
Yep.
Well,
and isn't that the tension of being human? We're trying to talk about something ineffable, something unknowable, something completely mysterious, and have a relationship. That's pretty hard to do, both in language and in function.
Joan Friedman?
I just wanted to throw in the spirit of taking things entirely differently than the way they were meant. Where it talks about the offerings, and God, approving of our offerings and our burnt offerings. In the more mundane thing, that just reminds me so much of cooking, in the sense of, the successful offerings, and then there's the burnt offerings, like even when we screw up and burn the soup. And in a more profound way, maybe, in our Chevruta, we said that, the offerings reminded us of the offerings that the class comes up with. And we even have burnt offerings, right?
Wow, Dean's burnt offerings.
Oh my God.
Fabulous. Whoa, that's fantastic.
Wow.
I love we have offerings and we have a burnt offerings. That's fantastic. I hadn't never thought about that. See, this is where a problem where knowing the Hebrew is an obstacle, because in my mind, I'm thinking the Hebrew, which is very different. But yes, I totally love that. Dean, what do you think about that you've been doing burnt offerings this whole time? You've probably
I think I have been doing burnt offerings.
Exactly.
That was part of my language and what I chose.
I'm just catching up to you, Dean. Thank you for that, Joan.
Jeremy.
So the psalm begins with the troubled day, but we learn 2/3 of the way through it that that the battle has been won.
What are we doing?
And they lie prostrate, fallen, and we rise up standing erect. So we've won.
Someone's off mute. Joan, is that you?
Okay, well,
at any rate, to end and then we end up back in a plea.
Yeah.
So do we believe that this psalm was written after the victory, and the victory doesn't solve the problems of the trouble or the wars going on?
Well, I think for Fisher, he doesn't care about that. So the question is, what do you think?
Well,
Fisher,
they lie prostrate and fallen, but we rise up standing erect. Oh, be our savingness. I don't know. Maybe it's just simply that we call out to your calling, that God is calling to us, and we are calling out to God forever. That this is the tension, and this is the continual give and take. So in spite of the fact that we may win a battle, that the next day presents us with still more challenges, but we have risen up standing erect, thanks to God.
Yeah, look, I think that this is another example that the original psalmist probably had a historical moment he might have been responding to, but Fisher doesn't care about that. And I don't think you need to. You have to find where you'll be.
Well, I'm just interested in the tension.
Yep. So do you see that in the original also, or you're just responding to Fisher's?
Well, and I don't have the Hebrew, but
Yeah.
in my welkin. But may Adonai respond to you on a troubled day, says Levi, and O Majesty, may you respond to us the day that we call, is Levi's bookends. But we also know that Levi says, I know that Adonai has brought victory to the anointed ruler, not necessarily to the psalmist, but responding from his holy heaven through the victorious power of his right hand. But that victory doesn't solve the problem of the psalmist.
I agree.
Still, the psalmist is still in the plea.
Yep.
All right. So
sorry about the inward sounds.
Okay, Judy Frank for the last question. Judy, you have to unmute yourself. Judy,
yeah, I just wanted to comment that the second to last lines are comparison of Judaism to other religions, whereas they trust in horses or whatever, but we trust in your nameless. They lie prostrate because they have to prostrate before other gods, but mostly we always stand up erect when we pray, except for that one time of the year. So that's what I wanted to bring out without saying in so much.
That's very interesting. I don't know. That's very interesting.
Yeah. So 100,000 prostrations in Tibetan Buddhism you're supposed to do as a beginning student.
Well, and even think about the Purim story, right? Where Haman demands everybody prostrate themselves. It's also a thing about prostrating to other rulers. And Mordecai says, no, we don't do that. So that's very interesting. See, I learned so much from all of you.
Wow. All right. So Monday is one day of offerings. Everyone is invited to participate and send things in by 5 o'clock on Sunday. And then we'll take a look at what we did and choose the ones based on who already has done offerings for the past 5 Psalms. Rabbi, the next Psalm we'll be studying is, we're staying in order?
21, we're staying in order. Oops, yes, am I muted? No. Yes, we're continuing in order.